All right, in this video we'll continue our review of Unit 1 for Algebra 1. And so just like we did in number 13 here, we are going to cross multiply. And so I'm going to multiply the 2 times the x plus 3 first. It actually doesn't matter which way you multiply first. I mean, I could have multiplied the 4 times x minus 6 first if I wanted to. So we're cross multiplying, we get 2 times x plus 3 is equal to 4 times x minus 6. And you might wonder, do I really need the parentheses? And yes, you do, because you're multiplying 2 times that whole numerator there. It's not just 2 times the x, it's 2 times that whole numerator you've got to distribute. All right, so let's go ahead and simplify by distributing on both sides. We'll get 2x plus 6. On the other side, we're going to get 4x minus 24. And so we've simplified all that we could, and so now we're going to want to isolate x on one side. Notice it's on both sides. So again, I tend to keep my x on the left. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4x on both sides. But again, you could have subtracted 2x on both sides and solve for x, you get the same answer, as long as you do your steps correctly. So 2 and a minus 4, that's going to give us negative 2x. We've got a plus 6, and then on the other side just negative 24. So notice we're down to a two-step equation. We're going to have to do 2 inverse operations. We always add or subtract first in a situation like this. So we'll subtract 6 on both sides. We get negative 2x is equal to negative 30. And the opposite of multiplying by negative 2, notice we need to get rid of that negative 2 there. Opposite of multiplying by negative 2 is dividing by negative 2. Of course, we know a negative divided by a negative is a positive. We're going to end up with 1x, or x, is equal to 15. All right, number 15. Find the solution set for the inequality, then graph it. So what we learned about inequalities is when we solve them, it's very much like solving equations, except for 2 things. Number 1, if we multiply or divide both sides by a negative number while we're doing our inverse operations, we have to reverse the symbol. And the other thing is our solutions aren't going to be a single value. Like on number 14, our solution was 15. Now our solutions are going to be sets of numbers. In fact, that's why we're graphing the solution, so you can see what that set of numbers is. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Now, if this were an equation, I would just be thinking, oh, it's simplified on both sides, but I do have to isolate x on one side, so let's subtract 6x on both sides. 3 and a minus 6 is going to give you negative 3, so we get negative 3x plus 6 is greater or equal to negative 12. So now it's like having a two-step equation. We're going to subtract 6 on both sides. We're going to get negative 3x is greater or equal to negative 18. And now we're trying to get rid of this 3. This negative 3, the opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3. So we'll do that on each side. Hopefully right there, a little red light went off in your brain and you're like, wait a second, I just divided by a negative and I have to reverse that symbol, and so that's what we're going to do. We get x is equal to, or less than or equal to 6. And so that is our solution. And so when you graph that, it looks like, well, first of all, I'll put 0 and 6 on there. So basically, I want to graph the numbers that are less than 6, or smaller than 6, or equal to 6. And so this inequality represents these numbers, the numbers that are either equal to 6 or less than 6. Notice we have a solid dot on the 6 because of this equal sign. The 6 is part of our solution, or part of our solution set. All right, let's move on. Okay, so on number 16, we're going to do the same kind of thing we did with equations. It says, basically we're solving each inequality for x, and we're going to give our explanations. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. you can see on number 1, we've got a lot of simplifying to do. Mainly, I think, first of all, we want to get rid of those parentheses, and so we're going to distribute. So negative 2 times 9x is negative 18x, and negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. It's negative 6, so we'll subtract 6. And then bring down that minus 7x. Now on the other side, we can bring down the minus 10x. And notice we're going to be distributing a negative 1 here. Negative 1 times 12 is negative 12x. So we write minus 12x. And negative 1 times 9 is negative 9. And we'll write that as a minus 9. All right, so notice we've gotten rid of the parentheses, but we're still not simplified. In fact, on the left, we've got a couple of x terms. Oops, before I do that, remember we're supposed to explain how we went from step 1 to 2. We distributed negative 2 and we distributed negative 1. All right, now we can combine our like terms on the left. Negative 18x and a negative 7x. Well, negative 18 and negative 7 is negative 25. So we get negative 25x minus 6 is greater or equal. Now we've got a negative 10x and a negative 12x. That's negative 22x. And bring down that minus 9. So what did we do going from step 2 to 3? We combine like terms. All right, number 4, or actually, yeah, next step. So notice we have no more simplifying to do. We have no like terms here on this side, and we don't have any like terms over here on this side. And so now we're ready to think in terms of, do we have x isolated on one side? Well, it's actually on both sides. That means we got to get rid of it on one of the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and add 22x to both sides. I tend to want to keep my x on the left. Negative 25 and 22, we're going to get negative 3x, and also bring down that minus 6. And on the right side, the minus 22x and a plus 22x, those add up to 0, and you're left with the minus 9. So once more, we're down to like a 2-step equation. We're down to 2 more steps. We're going to want to add or subtract first. So to get rid of, we're trying to get x by itself here. To get rid of that minus 6, we'll do the opposite and add 6. Oops, I forgot again. Going from step 3 to 4, we did the inverse operation. We added 22x on both sides. Now I'm ready to add my 6 to both sides. We get negative 3x is greater or equal to negative 3. And how did we do that? Again, we did the inverse operation thing. We added 6 on both sides. All right, so now we're almost there. 1 step to go. How am I going to get rid of the negative 3? Well, it's times x, so we'll do the opposite and divide by negative 3, or the inverse of multiplying by negative 3. And so we will get x is less than or equal to 1. Notice I divided by a negative, so I had to reverse that symbol. And negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. And so what did we do on that last step? We again did the inverse operation and divided both sides by negative 3. All right, let's move on to number 17. Oh, and again, because we divided by a negative, we flipped the symbol. You want to make sure you don't forget that. The only time, as you're solving an equation like this, the only time you switch that symbol is when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative number. It's got to be negative. It's got to be multiplication or division. All right, so let's look at 17. So now we're going to continue solving inequalities. So here you're going to want us to simplify the left side. We need to distribute. We'll get a minus 2x plus 8 is greater or equal to negative 5x plus 20. So both sides are now simplified. We're going to want to isolate x on one side. Notice it's on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and add 5x to both sides. Negative 2 and 5 is 3. I'm going to get 3x here, plus we'll bring the 8 down. On the other side, we're just going to be left with 20. So we've got 2 more steps to go here to get x by itself. We're going to want to subtract 8 on both sides. We get 3x is greater or equal to 12. And then we'll want to divide by 3. 3 times x, the opposite of multiplying by 3, we divide. And so we're going to get 1x, or x, is greater or equal to 4. And so that's our solution. Notice our symbol never reversed, and the reason why is we never divided by a negative, or we never multiplied it both sides by a negative. All right, number 18. Let's see, we don't have any simplifying to do, but we do need to get x isolated on one side, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract 6x on both sides. And so we get negative 3x plus 6 is greater than negative 12. And again, everything's simplified. We got x on one side. Now we have a 2-step inequality. We're going to want to add or subtract next. So we'll subtract 6 on both sides. You get negative 3x is greater than negative 18. And then we want to divide by negative 3. Notice we divided by a negative. We're going to have to reverse that symbol. We get x is less than positive 6. So x is less than 6, and on the number line, it's going to look like that. Notice how I've got an open circle here. That means 6 is not in this set. We read this, x is less than 6, and so that represents the numbers that are less than 6. That's these guys. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and solve this the other way, just so you can see, especially with inequalities, you got to be a little bit careful with this. So what if you said, hey, I want to subtract 3x on both sides? You get 6 is greater than 3x minus 12. Now I'm trying to get x by itself, so I got to focus on this side now. So I would want to add 12 to both sides, and then divide by 3. And so you end up with 6 is less than x. So normally with inequalities, you're going to be asked to write your variable on the left. You can read this as 6 is greater than x, but if you read it backwards, it says x is less than 6. We can read inequalities both directions. If I read it from left to right, it's 6 is greater than x. If I read it from right to left, I would read it x is less than 6, which is what we have here. All right, let's move on. Okay, so on number 19, it says Devin owns a remodeling business. To paint a room, he charges $65 or a $65 consultation fee. When he begins the job, he charges $40 per hour. We're calling our hours H, plus the cost of supplies S. So we have a consultation fee, and notice here C stands for charges. He begins the job, he charges, so you've basically got this fee for consultation, and then $40 per hour. Notice that's this part here. So if you worked 1 hour, it'd be $40 times 1. That you'd be paying $40 for that 1 hour. If you work 2 hours, it'd be 2 times 40. So that's the way it works. And then you also have to pay the cost of supplies. He's not going to pay for those. All right, so let's go ahead and, whoops, I don't know if I want to do that. It says, what is the total cost to paint a room that requires 8 hours of work? So let's see, 8 would be our H, and notice 220 is our S. It's the amount spent on supplies. And so let's go ahead and write our equation. It's the cost, or C, is equal to 65 plus 40 times H. Well, we just said H is 8, plus S, which here is 220. And so that's the equation you should get. And you can throw that into your calculator. You get 605. Remember, this is money, so it's actually $605. Now they're asking you to put your answer in the box here. Notice there's no dollar sign, so we're just going to put 605. And you can really put the 605 anywhere in this area here. I'm going to go ahead and put it to the right. And when you bubble in your numbers, it'll look like that. All right, number 20, it says, write an equation, an algebraic equation to represent the written description below. So 15 is 6 less than 3 times a number. So you're literally translating this. 15, oops, you know what, let me change colors here. I like my blue better. So 15 is, we use equal, or we translate that as equal, and we want to write 6 less than 3 times a number. 6 less than 3 times a number. Now what if I wanted to know the number that's 6 less than 10? Wouldn't you start with 10 and subtract off 6 and you'd get 4? What number is 6 less than 10? That would be 4. So it's going to be the same thing here. First I want to write 3 times a number. I guess we'll use x here. We don't know what the number is. We're going to call it x. So 3 times a number, we want 6 less than that. We subtract off 6. So 15, so hopefully you can read this now and it seems reasonable to you. 15 is, or equals, 6 less than 3 times a number. So this is 3 times a number, and I want 6 less than that. I have to subtract off 6. And so that is our answer. 15 is equal to 3x minus 6. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop this video right